welcome back to the Boat Nook. I was fortunate enough to, at least hopefully, to pick up this little Tohatsu 50 horsepower outboard motor a few days ago. It's a somewhere between this middle to late 1990s, like 95, 96, 97, 98, somewhere in there. I got it for not quite free, but almost free, and it came with the motor and the wiring harness and the control box, tachometer, and trim gauge. Don't have the throttle and shifter cable, but that's pretty easy to get. It just uses just a regular 33C type cable. Was told it ran, but it needed seals on the gearbox or the lower unit. Wiring harness had been cut in two, and I spliced it back together and actually hooked up a battery to it and cranked it up, and it cranked up and ran right away after getting the wiring straightened out. It does need seals on the lower unit. You can see where oil is trying to run out a little bit around the seals, and it definitely needed an impeller. The water pump was pretty weak, so I just ran it just for a few seconds, honestly, and turned it off. Want to take the foot off of it where I can work on it, but I need to be able to tilt it up to get it off. I mounted it on the transom of this little 15-foot Henry O. I just find that it's easier to work on a motor like this, like pulling the foot off of it stuff, if you've got it mounted to something that's real rigid, and instead of just a stand, where it might get away from you and turn over or whatever. So anyway, I've got it. Yesterday I lifted it up with my chain hoist and mounted it on the back of this boat. This is where I'm going to use this motorette. It'll be a good combination for this boat here, 50 horsepower. But as you can see, the trim and tilt works. So all the problem with this motor, seems to be down here in the foot. On this Tohatsu motor, the linkage comes apart right here. It has a little small drift pin that you have to knock out right there to separate the linkage, the top half and the bottom half. So you just knock out that one upper drift pin right there, and then that'll separate right there. And then you've got 6 bolts, 3 on each side, that you take out, and then that whole lower unit should pop out. But sometimes the bolts come out and sometimes they don't. Sometimes you got to put a torch on them and heat them up and things like that. But right here is the bolt that the previous owner broke right there. So I should be able to get that out. He started taking this one out and stopped, so I don't know whether it started twisting on him and felt like it was breaking or what, but he just stopped. But if all else fails, I can just take and pull the prop off, and I can get those seals out with everything in place if I have to. If I have to do that, I'll show you how to do that. Here is that little drift pin, or rolled pin, whatever you want to call it. That was right there. There's 2 pins that connect, one to the bottom and one to the top linkage. You just need to knock out the top one so it'll separate. And what I didn't have a punch that little, so I just used a small drill bit that would fit in the hole and just loose, and then I just knocked it out with a drill bit, and that took it right out. And then these 13mm bolts. Oh, that turned easy. That turned easy too. all three of those turned. I hadn't put any heat on them or anything. They just come right out. So one might have been in this one before. Okay, hopefully the other side will come out that easy. So, first one's turning. Oh yeah. They all are coming out. So that's a good thing. Being that it was leaking oil, that means that it probably also got water in the foot. So there's a chance I may have to replace the bearings and all down here in the gear case, or in the, in the lower unit of the foot. I know I at least have to replace the seals as well as the water pump. Okay, one more bolt to get out, and then it should just slide right out, I hope. I think. Okay, that should just pop straight down now, I think. Yeah. Okay. This is the lower unit under the foot off of Tohatsu 50 horsepower outboard. And I need to change the seal right here where some just a touch of oil, the lower unit oil is seeping out just a little bit. I just got this motor a couple weeks ago. I didn't give hard anything for it. The motor actually runs good. I've got it running decent, and the previous owner had attempted to take this off and broke that bolt out right there, and he just decided he didn't want to go any further and just stopped and sold it basically as a junk motor, but it's a good motor. But unfortunately, it's got a couple of problems that we've got to try to address. And I'm going to take this seal out without taking this shaft out. I'm going to just pull it out kind of a hack way, if you will. You have to be real careful though not to let the tip of the screw or the threads of the screw hit the shaft though, because if you scratch up the shaft right there where that seal has to seal against it, then you haven't done anything at all other than make the leak worse. So anyway, I'm going to try to get it out. This housing here is badly corroded. It's probably partly because of salt water, but partly it has worn away that outer shoulder of that center hub right there. And all that's for is to hold that seal in place. And of course, there's a bearing behind it that's in that housing, but this outer edge is just for that seal to seal against. So as long as you can get that seal to make contact where it won't leak, the seal just sits there. It's pretty much inert. The shaft spins inside the center of the seal. So it's not like the seal is constantly moving. It doesn't. Once you get it in there, it's and without leaking, it pretty much stays that way. But I'm going to see what I can do with it. I'm going to try to drill that screw out and replace that, or bolt and replace that bolt. Although this is not going to come out easily anyway. So, and it's so corroded, if I put a puller on it, it's a good chance it's going to break those fins in there that connect the inner and outer housing. So we'll probably just leave that alone and maybe try to replace that broken bolt, although it probably will be fine even with that in place, because it's going to be difficult to get it out. But I'm going to try to replace the seal. I ordered 2 seals. It only takes 1, but I ordered 2 in case I mess one of them up. And then I also ordered a water pump, upper housing, and impeller, and liner, and gaskets, and all that stuff, because when it didn't have really good water flow whenever I cranked it and ran it some. And if you look right carefully right there, you can see that this upper housing is cracked right here, and it's also cracked on the other side. So whatever's going on in there that cracked that, I'm just going to replace that whole housing, and everything that's inside of there be replaced new. So I don't know whether that's from age or whether somebody put the wrong impeller in it and put too much outward pressure on it or what. I don't have any idea, but gonna try to solve that problem too, and see if I can't get this thing working. I've also got a new fin trim tab ordered for it. It should be here this afternoon, I think. But I've already got that bolt out without any issue, so I know I can replace that. I've already had this one off and just stuck it back on temporarily till the new one comes. So I've got that. This bolt I got out without too much effort, without breaking it, but I've just put it back in because, you know, of that bolt there. So, and I got the foot off of the motor without any problem at all. It came off, you know, fairly straightforward. But just unfortunately, it's just got that bad corrosion right there, right around where that seal has to lip. And as long as the sides of the seal can make good enough contact to seal, even if you have to put some type of compound around it to get it to seal, that's okay too, as long as it will hold it in place and it not move and not leak. So just kind of a quick and dirty fix, but I only gave $50 for the motor, so it's I think it's going to be worth messing with and see if I can't get it fixed. I'm going to start by just using this little dental pick and just trying to get this little spring out to start with. And then, of course, this is a rubber seal, but there's a metal, it'll be like a metal plate inside it there. And I've got to run a screw down through into that little metal plate on either side of that shaft, and I can't let the screw touch the shaft and scratch the shaft. Okay, using the little dental pick, I've pulled out the spring, and I've pulled out the upper rubber seal. So now I'm down to the metal ring that's inside of the rubber seal, and I got to try to get that out. Well, I just took that dental pick and just cleaned up around the edges of this thing a little bit. This housing is in terrible condition. You can see that it's deteriorated away, corroded away, down close to half of the depth, probably half of the depth of the whole seal housing there. So it's maybe beyond saving, but I'm gonna try. But in the meantime, I'll keep my eyes open for a used foot for a Tohatsu 50. So what I did, using a small drill bit, I drilled a hole right there in the side where the housing was already chipped away anyway. I drilled a hole. This right here was already broken out when I got the motor. All that was already gone. It's been up and all. But anyway, I put a screw very carefully in that hole, and I did not touch the shaft, at least not yet. I haven't. And then that gave me something to do some leverage. And then I just used a screwdriver and prised up, and I've got it popped out a bit now. So now I need to try to do the same thing on the other side so I can work it out. And on the other side, the housing is pretty much gone right here too, so I've got an area where I can drill a hole there as well. I just have to be real careful not to hit that shaft, because if I nick that shaft, you know, most likely the seal will never seal again on that shaft. At the very minimum, I'd have to polish it out, which would be, you know, difficult, not being able to get everything apart. And I can buy this whole housing here. I can buy that. It's not that expensive actually, but I'm gonna try to fix it without doing that first, because it's almost impossible to get it apart. So I've cleaned that all up as good as I can with some acetone. Got it good a shape as I can get it, pretty much. It's pretty shot, but you may be able to see down in there. Down there's a shoulder that the seal goes down. That's where the bottom point of it is. It goes down in until it hits that little shoulder, and that's where it stops. So I've got just a little bit of housing here and here above the shoulder there, down in there. A little bit more here and here. But what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take the new seal and put some 3M 5200 around the outer edges of the seal, and right around that lip right there, and set that seal in a light bed of 5200 against that housing, and just kind of a last ditch effort to be able to save this if it don't work. Like I say, I can keep working and try to get this out with some heat and whatever, and just replace that whole housing there. But what I'll prefer to do is just find a second-hand lower unit to fit this motor that's still in pretty good shape. This one's the motor itself's in good shape. The interior, underneath the cowling of the motor and all that, looks clean. Everything looks good. There's not corrosion or anything. Just this lower unit has got some severe corrosion where the exhaust comes out there. And like I say, it's the rest of the motor looks real good. And it runs good. It's got good compression, the whole bit. It's just this problem with this seal. So I'm going to just see if I can, like I say, just kind of a last-ditch effort to doctor it up and see if I can make it work. And if not, I'll just move on to plan B. All right, so I got the new seal pressed in, and I just put the 5200 around that shoulder all the way around as I pressed it in, and then I used it to, just kind of build up that edge that's missing so it all kind of seals together. Like I say, if it doesn't work, I'm not really out much, but it might work. I did clean it really good with acetone before I put it in there, to get any that oil, gear oil, cleaned off of it and all, and the exhaust gases cleaned off of it. That really not a big deal right here. The propeller actually fits inside of here. The shoulder, that shoulder right there on the propeller fits down inside of there, and I can rebuild that with some epoxy JB weld if I feel like I need to. Just put like a plastic liner on the inside, something that it won't stick to, and then build it up from the outside and put a piece of tape around it, and then peel off the tape and take out the liner and have that little shoulder put back on there if I feel like I need to. But anyway, I'll let that cure for a couple days. That was the fast setting 5200, so it'll cure in a day, but I'll probably leave it for a good while before I put oil back in this thing. And I'd already drained the oil out of it. Didn't really see any evidence of water in this thing whenever I drained the oil out of it, but it was, really, really black, dirty black like it usually is. I use this cardboard tube right here. It's a thick wall cardboard tube that I just happened to have laying around that would work. It used to have stretch wrap stuff on it. And I use that to fit around that shaft and to tap that seal down in with to get it, tapped down level and flat to that shoulder down in there. And that worked pretty good, a piece of pipe or anything that was cut square. But that cardboard, wouldn't damage that the rubber on that seal. And it actually worked real well. Just tapped it right down in there.